to my channel. So in today's video I would like to review this book here called Girls and Autism, Educational, Family and Personal Perspectives, edited by Barry Carpenter, Francesca Happe and Joe Egerton. This review is going to be carried out over a couple of weeks. We'll see how we get on, but I'd imagine it would take a couple of weeks because I'm not going to be able to cover everything in today's two videos because it's a big book and each part of the book is sort of self-contained and covers a different theme within the sort of general overriding theme of women and girls with autism. So I'd just like to read a little bit of a blurb on the back just so you can see what the book is broadly about. So often thought of as a predominantly male disorder, autism has long gone unidentified, unnoticed and unsupported in girls, sometimes with devastating consequences for their social and mental well-being. As current research reveals a much more balanced male-to-female ratio in autism, this book provides crucial insight into autistic girls' experiences, helping professionals to recognise, understand, support and teach them effectively. Drawing on the latest research findings, chapters consider why girls have historically been overlooked by traditional diagnostic approaches, identifying behaviours that may be particular to girls, and exploring the camouflaging that can make the diagnosis of autistic girls more difficult. Chapters emphasise both the challenges and advantages of autism and take a multidisciplinary approach to encompass contributions from autistic girls and women, their family members, teachers, psychologists and other professionals. So that's just a little bit of a blurb. The three editors, we've got Barry Carpenter, who is Professor of Mental Health in Education at Oxford Brookes University, UK, Francesca Happe, who is Professor of Cognitive Neuroscience at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience, King's College London, UK, and Joe Egerton is a schools research consultant running school-based research courses for teaching school alliances and academies. And the general context behind the book was the National Autism and Girls Forum, which was originally brought together by the National Association for Special Educational Needs and is currently hosted by the National Association of Head Teachers. And this book is a product of a national conference, the Big Shout, in January 2016, which was created by the National Autism and Girls Forum with the National Association of Head Teachers, and the Big Shout conference. Presentations led to this book, and it also led to a call to action to share the conference's key messages with politicians. So that's a kind of background to how this book came into being. In the introduction or forward to this book, we hear from Sophie Walker. Now, Sophie Walker is the mother of an autistic girl called Grace, who was diagnosed when she was 8 years old. I know a little bit about Sophie Walker because I actually read her book, Grace Under Pressure, where she talks about her experiences of bringing up her daughter Grace. And although 8 years old seems quite a young age by many people's experiences to get a diagnosis of autism and Asperger's, it actually took 5 years for Sophie to get her daughter a diagnosis. So 5 years from the point at which she first raised concerns, which is a long time. And this is only even not that long ago. Grace is now a teenager, so it's not that long ago. And she says that the reason for this is partly because local systems are underfunded and teachers undertrained. But she now also thinks that part of the delay was also because Grace was not a boy, is not a boy. So obviously we can't do we can't do a sort of experiment with that and test that. That's not possible. We don't know for certain, but the likelihood is based on the statistics that maybe if she was a boy, she might have got that diagnosis earlier. But of course we don't know with absolute certainty because other factors might have been involved as well. But Sophie talks about the male diagnostic gaze. So from Asperger and Hans Asperger and Leo Kanner, right back in the 1940s, through to Simon Van Cohen in the present day, autism has been seen as a male condition, and it has been analysed by largely male doctors. I mean, obviously there have been a few exceptions, such as Lorna Wing and Judith Gould and a few female clinicians, but predominantly it has been male psychiatrists, particularly, in the past. And this is not just a case with autism, but for most medical conditions, both psychological and physical conditions, women have largely been kept out. It's like a man's world. So many conditions, if you've got men analysing them, they're going to see what it's like for men to have these conditions and not what it's like for women to have these conditions, and potentially slightly different symptoms maybe that may be shown by women. And not only that, but mothers were blamed for their child's autism. So this is a very anti-female narrative in more ways than one. She talks about the double discrimination of being female and autistic. So obviously all autistics face discrimination, but if you're female, you experience good discrimination of also being female, which is that's what intersectionality looks at. You get how discrimination can be multiple. So obviously if you're just autistic, you'll just experience discrimination based upon being autistic, but if you're autistic and a woman, you'll face double discrimination, and of course maybe triple discrimination if you also happen to be gay, and even more discrimination if you happen to be black or from an ethnic minority group, and so on. And she talks about how her daughter Grace was lucky in a sense that in the end her frustration took the form of a typically male reaction. So she fought her way out, swinging at the bullies, and her punches flagged a crisis to authorities. So maybe if Grace had been more passive and had not reacted in such an out there way, she might have not got diagnosed much later. So we get a few statistics that are given in this book, which are quite shocking. On page 3, only 8% of intellectually able girls under 6 years old, compared with 25% of boys, were diagnosed. 8% versus 25%, that's a big gap. And at age 11, 20% of girls are diagnosed versus 50% of boys are diagnosed. And then there's a quote from Sarah Wilde. Now, Sarah Wilde is the head teacher of Limpsfield Grange School, which is the only state-maintained, local authority-funded school in the UK that caters to girls with autism and other social and communication challenges. It's one of a kind, because the girls who go to that school, it's very holistic. They get a very holistic education. They're encouraged to pursue their academic sort of like interests and to get qualifications, but at the same time they're given a lot of help socially and emotionally. I would have loved to have gone to a school like that, because I've seen these girls talk and online, I've watched videos of them talking. They seem so mature and so self-aware of themselves, it's just quite amazing, and just such an amazing thing. And they also, there was a documentary about Limpsfield Grange School as well a couple of years ago that I watched. So Sarah Wilde, she's head teacher of Limpsfield Grange, says on page 4, just because the girls aren't obsessed with Thomas the Tank Engine doesn't mean they're not on the spectrum. Just because they can make eye contact, have a reciprocal conversation with someone for 5 minutes and exchange small pleasantries doesn't mean they're not autistic. It means they've learned to do it. We have to redefine what we think autism is. And it's also pointed out that if, say, you're a quiet, anxious girl, or boy, of course, it doesn't just refer to girls by any means, but particularly if you're a girl and you're quiet and anxious at the back of a classroom concealing your difficulties behind a socially acceptable mask, you're less likely to receive support and help in a timely diagnosis. And I can relate to that because at secondary school, less so at primary school when I was more out there, but at secondary school I did kind of withdraw into myself, and I was often, just very quiet and kind of sitting on my own, at the back of a classroom, and not really causing any disruption, but just, I was there but I was not there. I was there but I was not actually being included. And of course teachers would just see me just being all quiet and well behaved and not really think, oh, there's a girl with issues or something that needs to be looked into more. Obviously I had bad OCD which was developing at the time, but I was very secretive about it, and the only people who really knew about this were my parents, really. And yeah, and also, of course, I didn't really have the confidence to ask for help, and I didn't really know what I was struggling with. As far as I was concerned, it was just me. I wasn't really analysing things to ask like why that much at that age, so I didn't really ask for help. I just suffered in silence, really, a lot of the time. And then we got some more shocking statistics from Francesca Happe. So on page 11, she talks about that she's been revisiting published studies on gender ratios. So in 2017, Looms et al. Considers the quality of the evidence from different study methods. If you estimate how many girls have autism diagnoses from clinical or school records, you will likely miss some people who fly under the radar. If instead you actively go out and try to screen every child in a specific area, you are more likely to get an accurate estimate of a male to female ratio. So if you go out and do a whole population-wide representative study, you're going to see a more accurate picture than if you just stick to what's kind of recorded in clinics or schools. So she says that it's very likely not 10 to 1 or even 5 to 1 males to girls with an autism diagnosis, with autism, but more likely 3 to 1. The idea that the girls are far less often affected is called into question, as so many are undiagnosed. The studies that looked at the numbers of females known to services found 5 males to 1, but population screening is more like 3 to 1. So she says what we think we know about autism from research is actually just what we know about male autism, and this then feeds into diagnostic criteria, creating a vicious circle. Now, I'm not going to go into this too much now, but I might touch upon it later. I would question whether actually there is such a thing as male autism. Is there really such a thing? I think it's maybe a little bit too narrow, a bit too black and white. They often say autistics are black and white, but I think that this is too black and white, actually. Thinking of it as like a binary, male autism, female autism, I put a big question mark there. Would it be better actually just to think that autism is very variegated? It's very broad. It's the same core symptoms are there, but they're expressed in different ways and across genders. And of course, it's very narrow just to think of male-female, particularly as there are a whole way of different genders, and there are many trans people who are autistic, and many boys and men who don't display this traditional narrow view of what autism is, and many females who actually fit into the narrow traditional view, and everything in between. So I just think that thinking of it as male versus female autism is creating a new set of problems and a new set of stereotypes that actually I think can be quite regressive. So while it looks all progressive, are we not just creating new boxes? So yeah, let me know what you think about that. So I'm going to be moving on to video number 2 now to carry on this review. So moving on to video number 2.